Today we'll talk about how sometimes it's not big events that end a marriage, but a small tone. My 74-year-old guest will tell us how setting a single boundary 30 years ago changed his life. What was happening in your marriage before you set that boundary?
I am 74 years old. Even as I say this, my throat still tightens, because if I hadn't set that boundary, I wouldn't be sitting here today saying we're still together after 30 years. When people hear set a boundary, they imagine yelling, throwing a fit, slamming doors. What I did wasn't like that. In the early years of my marriage, being a good wife meant always putting up with things. My mother was like that. The women we knew around us were like that. If your husband is tired, you won't complain. If his words were harsh, you wouldn't be sensitive. If something hurt you, you would smile as if nothing had happened. I thought this was being strong. Actually, it wasn't. In my 20s, I wasn't mature enough to realize this. By the time I reached 40, it had become a habit. Household chores, the children's needs, work, bills. I was always trying to resolve tensions, doing everything I could to make everyone comfortable, while saying, I won't cause any trouble. I was actually nurturing a small resentment inside me every day. Let me also say this. My husband wasn't a bad man. Looking at us from the outside, everyone would say, what a lucky woman. He was hard-working, devoted to his family, and took responsibility. But sometimes he would use such a tone at home. It was as if I wasn't a grown adult, but a child who constantly made mistakes. That tone caused the deepest wound over the years, because even if they weren't physical, some words hit you like a slap. I slowly changed too. I started wanting less, talking less, dreaming less. To avoid arguments, I would end the debate inside myself first. Now is not the time. He's stressed too. Forget it. Every time I said these words, it was as if I was taking a piece of myself away. After a while, our marriage became less about the closeness of two people and more about the routine of the same house. I was maintaining the routine. I was putting my feelings on hold for later, and that later never came. What was building up inside me wasn't love. It was loneliness mixed with silence. As that loneliness grew, I still thought being an easy woman was a virtue. I lived not so that he would love me, but so that he wouldn't get angry. When I looked in the mirror in the evenings, I felt that the smile on my face wasn't mine. It was as if I was acting and no one was pulling back the curtain. Until that day, 30 years ago, I hadn't really seen where this was going, because some truths aren't understood until they suddenly hit you in the face. There weren't many fights in our house, at least not from the outside, because I would smooth things over to prevent arguments. If I had something to say, I would weigh it up inside first. I would give up, thinking, if I say this, it will cause tension. Then I realized that every day was the same. Breakfast, the kids' school, work, shopping, dinner, cleaning up. I was always on the go, but somewhere inside I was always standing still. It was as if life was flowing by, and I was keeping my feelings on hold in a corner. When my husband came home, I would greet him according to how his day had gone. If he was angry, I was the one who calmed him down. If he was anxious, I was the one who said, we'll figure it out. People called this sacrifice, and I praised myself for it. But as the years passed, I realized that sacrifice, if it doesn't bring respect and closeness in return, makes a person invisible. Because when you say okay to everything, no one thinks you might have boundaries. Sometimes small problems would arise, a sentence, a look, a again tone, in front of the children as if I were an unnecessary detail. In those moments, I would suppress what rose up inside me. Don't let the kids see. Don't make a big deal out of it. I'm already tired. While silencing myself, I was actually losing something else, my self-respect. If anyone is watching this today, stop for a moment and ask yourself, when was the last time something hurt you? And instead of saying that hurt, you just smiled and moved on. The most dangerous thing was this. Over time, I started to present myself as someone who wanted little, as if not needing anything was a virtue. It's no problem for me. It doesn't matter. You know best. These words came easily to my lips because I wasn't fighting, because I looked strong. But at night, when everyone was asleep, when I was alone in the kitchen, an emptiness echoed inside me. That emptiness wasn't just a lack of love, it was the fear of not being understood. The person next to you looking at you, but not seeing you. There was a truth I couldn't even admit to myself at the time. I wasn't afraid of losing my husband, I was afraid of feeling unworthy of love, so I lowered my voice. And the more I lowered my voice, the easier that tone came out, because there was nothing to stand up to. Then one evening, a day that started like any other, it hit me like a slap in the face. It wasn't a big event, but for me, it was like the summary of everything. That day, for the first time, I said, if this continues, I will burn out. That night, for the first time, I sensed that I had been looking for love in the wrong place for years, and that I would only understand this once I paid the price. I will tell you about it, because there are some lessons that people realize too late. That day had actually started out ordinary. The kids' homework, an unfinished shopping list, a pot boiling on the stove, the background music of my life. My husband came home a little tense. You could see it on his face. I again prepared myself, thinking, okay, now is not the right time. I softened my voice, kept my questions short, and tried to keep the atmosphere calm. So as usual, I managed his nerves first, and then hid my own feelings. But there are some days, no matter how skilled you are, you can't hide the break inside you, because it's not about what happened that day. It's about years of accumulated feelings coming together in a single sentence. At the dinner table, one of the kids knocked over a glass. It was a very simple thing. As I picked up the napkin to clean it up, my husband said something, without raising his voice, but in that familiar tone, half mocking, half reproachful, not a loud voice, but a condescension that weighs on your heart. One of those sentences that starts with, you always, and makes you feel like you're incompetent without actually saying it. The children fell silent. My hand remained on the napkin. At that moment, something I hadn't been able to say to myself for years suddenly became very clear. I wasn't just being hurt, I was being diminished. And the terrible thing was this. The children now thought that tone was normal. As I remained silent, that became the language of our home. A thought flashed through my mind. If I call this normal, my daughter will also call it normal when she grows up. That thought instantly erased all my excuses. The excuse of exhaustion, the excuse of stress, the excuse of never mind. They all became meaningless. Now, I want those watching this to think about this. What hurts you the most? The words spoken, or the feeling behind those words that says, you're small? Because that day I realized how much that feeling, more than the words, had been eating away at me for years. I was so quiet at the table that I could hear my own heartbeat. It was as if everything I had carried for years converged at a single point. At that moment I felt for the first time. If I smile again now, I will never be able to respect myself again. Even saying that sentence felt wrong to me, because I had always been used to putting myself second. But there is a place inside a person. Even if you silence it for years, one day it stands up. That night, I approached another truth. not just about my marriage, but about love itself. That some things we think of as love can actually be habit, fear, and silence. I can explore this part more deeply in my next story, because the price of realizing what love is too late can sometimes be heavy, and I don't want anyone to learn this too late. At that table, I made the decision that this cannot go on, but making a decision is easy. The real challenge is implementing it.
What exactly happened that day that made you say, this cannot go on?
What happened that day wasn't actually an explosion. On the contrary, it was, for the first time, a quiet clarity. When my husband said that sentence in that tone, there was a momentary silence at the table, and in that silence, I saw myself from the outside. Napkin in hand, a half smile on my face, automatically playing the role of the woman in charge, and with the children's eyes on me. At that moment, a single question echoed in my head. If I allow this, who will respect me? And worse, how will I respect myself? I put down my fork, slowly. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I just took a breath and said, when you speak in that tone, the conversation ends here. That was it. No long defense, no listing of past grievances, just a boundary. Then I did it. I really ended the conversation. At that moment, my husband was surprised, because for years I never ended conversations. I would soften them. I always waited to be understood. But even when disrespect began, I would stay at the table. That night, for the first time, I didn't stay at the table. I didn't continue clearing the plates. I told the children in a calm voice, "Go to your rooms." When they left, I went to the kitchen. I closed the door and just breathed for a few minutes. My heart was pounding because I knew for the first time that there would be a price to pay. Setting boundaries in a relationship often feels like risking losing something. I felt that too. My husband came up behind me and said, "What are you doing?" His tone was trying to go there again. At that moment, I did the same thing a second time. I didn't engage in an argument. I said, "If you talk in that tone, I won't continue. We'll talk when you calm down." And I was silent. This silence wasn't sulking, like it used to be. It was protecting myself. Now, those listening to me should ask themselves, when the line of respect is crossed, do you try to fix the conversation, or do you set the condition first? Because I tried to fix it for years. That night, for the first time, I set the condition. Then what I expected happened. My husband tested the boundary. "You're exaggerating," he said. "What's the big deal?" he said. But for the first time, I didn't enter into an explanation contest. "It matters to me. We won't talk like this," I said. Fewer words, clearer meaning. I didn't try to convince myself. I didn't try to convince him. I just stated the truth. There was no grand romantic scene at the end of that night, but something very important happened. For the first time at home, respect became a prerequisite for conversation. The moment I set that, my bargaining with my husband, no, with the fear I'd carried for years, ended. It was hard to sleep that night, because even when you stand up for yourself for the first time, the feeling of guilt follows. I thought, did I go too far? Then I asked myself this question: what is too much? Asking for respect, or putting up with disrespect for years? This question kept me awake until morning. The next day there was a strange feeling in the house, not an angry silence, more like a feeling that the rules have changed. My husband went to work and I stayed home. Normally by noon I would have smoothed things over myself, sent a message saying I was tense too and closed the subject. I didn't do that day. A voice inside me said, "If you soften now, this boundary will be as if it never existed." When he came home that evening, his first sentence was again like testing the boundary. "You were being ridiculous last night." The old me would have immediately started explaining. The new me said calmly. It wasn't ridiculous. When someone talks down to me, the conversation ends. If you want to talk, we'll talk respectfully. That was it. And again, I didn't get into an argument. Don't think it's easy to say that. My hands were shaking, because the fear inside me was, what if he leaves? But when I faced that fear, I realized this. Some people threaten to leave to control you. You give up on yourself so they'll stay. For the first time I said, if he stays, let him stay like this. Those weeks weren't easy. Setting boundaries doesn't fix everything instantly. Sometimes things seem to get worse first. My husband tried the same tone a few times. Each time I did the same thing. I stayed calm, stopped talking, and removed myself from the situation. No drama, no punishment, just the result. If anyone is watching this part, make a little note to yourself. Boundaries work not with words, but with repetition. If you say it once and then back down, that boundary remains a request. One evening, something different happened for the first time. My spouse said, "Okay, fine, let's talk." Their tone had softened. We sat down, and for the first time in years, I simply said this without bringing up the past. This language diminishes me. When I feel diminished, I can't get close to you. Closeness grows on top of respect. My words were clear. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I was just honest. That night, I touched on something I hadn't known for years. Trying to protect love by keeping quiet actually empties love of its meaning. Had I understood this sooner, I would have caused much less loss to myself and to him. People realize some truths too late. The price comes from exactly there. In another story I will tell soon, I will share how I paid dearly for realizing too late what the thing I thought was love was not, because I don't want anyone to be late in realizing this. Today, looking back 30 years later, I see this clearly. That boundary didn't change my spouse. It changed the language of our home first. When the language changed, the possibility of us getting closer returned. Before, every argument created a shrinking inside me. Then I would silently recover for days and return to the same routine. After the boundary, the nature of the arguments changed. The topic was still discussed, but not in a demeaning way, not by shouting, not by being sarcastic. That was the miracle for us. Of course, not everything was rosy. Sometimes old habits wanted to return. My spouse would sometimes say, "This is who I am." I would say, "This is who I am." No respect, no conversation. When I first said this sentence, I felt fear inside. Later, that fear gave way to confidence, because I learned this. A boundary is not a punishment for the other person. It is like a fence you put up to keep yourself from losing control. The existence of the fence protects the garden. When the garden is protected, something can grow inside it. While watching this video, some may say, "I tried that, but it didn't work." I'll tell you one thing. What works is not the beauty of the sentence, but its consistency. I didn't talk at length. I didn't dwell on the past. I didn't try to persuade anyone. I did the same thing every time. If the tone became disrespectful, I stopped talking. When things calmed down, I continued. That's it. If you currently feel like I have boundaries, but no one takes them seriously, ask yourself honestly, how many times have I stated this boundary, and how many times have I enforced it?
If you could go back today, what would you teach yourself earlier in a single sentence?
I taught myself that you don't protect yourself by erasing yourself, because for years I thought that if I endured, I would be loved. It turns out that enduring sometimes increases loneliness rather than love, and realizing this too late comes at a high price. In another conversation soon, I'll explain how I realized too late what I thought was love wasn't actually love, and how I paid a heavy price for it, maybe one person will wake up earlier in their own life. Today, I'll leave you with 3 clear lessons. First, boundaries are not about what you want, but what you won't accept. Second, boundaries are not a one-time statement, but a repeated behavior. Third, respect is not a luxury. It is the foundation of closeness, even a prerequisite. In a house without a foundation, nothing stays solid for long. When I set that boundary, I saved my marriage, yes, but more importantly, I got myself back. And when a person gets themselves back, the other person learns to talk to them differently. If we can still sit side by side after 30 years, it's not because of grand romantic words. It's because of a small but clear line, not in that tone,